Today I'm here with Professor Eduardo Bhatia, the former president of the Puerto Rican Senate and professor of public and international affairs at Princeton University. Professor Bhatia graduated from Stanford Law School, where he also founded and edited the Stanford Journal of Law and Policy. Before his career in politics, he also worked as a judicial officer and as the chief of staff for the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico, Jamie Foster, in Washington, D.C. He has served as a senator in the Puerto Rican Senate for 16 years in total, four of which were as president of the Puerto Rican Senate. So, good afternoon, Professor Bhatia. Thank you for accepting my invitation to talk on this matter.
Thank
Um,
you, Jorge. Thank you. It's a great opportunity to a great honor to be with you, and hopefully we'll be able to chat a little bit about some of the issues affecting Puerto Rico.
yeah.
I'll follow
So,
you. I'll follow your lead.
okay. So, in advance to this meeting, I prepared 6 questions, which I sent to you before, so you could prepare some responses.
Right.
And the first question, is what would the independence of Puerto Rico mean to you? So,
Well, I think independence has to be seen as one of the options that
mhm,
Puerto Ricans have. Unfortunately, from the democratic point of view, at least until now, that could change.
mhm,
Independence has not been supported by many people in Puerto Rico, but
mhm,
independence is the real. It's adopting the sovereignty that nations have
mhm,
to make decisions on their own. Now, that in theory is one thing, in practice
mhm,
is another thing. And Puerto
mhm,
Ricans have had, independence would mean giving away some of the items that Puerto Ricans have today under the U.S. system, which is
mhm,
citizenship, some social programs that
mhm,
usually benefit the poor, the
mhm,
access to the United States.
mhm,
Puerto Ricans look at the some of the neighboring
mhm,
islands Dominican Republic or some of the countries like Mexico, and folks are
mhm,
making an effort to they give up their lives to make it to the U.S. Puerto Ricans have
mhm,
free access each way. So
mhm,
this is independence for Puerto Rico. It's one of those issues that needs to be looked at from a balancing
mhm,
and basically not just thinking of independence as a romantic option.
mhm,
Everybody in Puerto Rico is proud of being Puerto Rican, and
mhm,
everybody who's Puerto Rican elsewhere is also proud of being Puerto Rican.
mhm,
But that's one thing, and a different thing is to alter the relationship without understanding the consequences. I think if people do understand the consequences, I think it's fine that people should have
mhm,
the right to choose their future.
mhm. So along those lines, how do you feel about like a slower process of independence, like through compacts of free association, kind of like what America already has with Palau and Micronesia and these other nations in the Pacific?
The United States has been reluctant in the past to enter into what they call asymmetric
Mm,
relationships with its citizens. What it has with Palau, it has never honored it. What it
mm,
has with other with the Micronesian islands, it has honored it only when it's when it wants to.
mm,
So it's in terms of population, we're talking about very few people. In the case of Puerto
mm,
Rico, it's sort of the big elephant in the room. It's about 3 million people in the
mm,
Micronesian islands, and elsewhere we're talking
mm,
of less than 50,000 people overall. So
mm,
I would say that there have been experiments of self-determination among U.S. territories, but I think all of them have, to an extent, failed because the
mm,
United States has never honored those relationships. And that, let me just throw in there, that
mm,
contrasts with other nations like the UK, the relationship
mm,
it has with Northern Ireland,
mm,
Canada, and the relationship it has with Quebec,
mm,
Spain, and the relationship it has with Barcelona and other autonomous regions.
mm,
So Puerto Rico, in a way, and the other U.S. territories find themselves in a very unique situation where some of the most important aspects of that uh, asymmetrical relationship that should develop with
mm,
the United States is not developing. Now,
mm,
is the Compact of Free Association a halfway route towards independence? Who knows? Who knows?
mm,
But the most important question, at least for me, is do
mm,
the people of Puerto Rico want independence?
mm,
And
Yeah.
if you ask that question out there right now,
Mm,
it's interesting that less than 10% of the people will say yes.
mm,
But when you have 90% of the people who are US citizens and who are saying they don't want independence, that creates a democratic problem. Because why
mm,
should we force independence on Puerto Rico
mm,
if the Puerto Ricans don't want it? If Puerto Ricans who live on the island, who will
mm,
receive the impact of the political,
mm,
legal, economic relationship
mm,
changing as a result of independence. So it's independence is the right of every nation, I think, and I think
mm,
Puerto Rico has a right to be independent. Puerto Rico has every reason in the world to fight for independence. Those who believe in independence, but at the end of the day, I think it should be clear that it should be the will of the people who should decide
mm.
the future of Puerto Rico.
Yeah. So given that it's it's not that it's unpopular in Puerto Rico, do you believe that uh how can I say this that uh the American government like because currently Puerto Ricans they don't have the ability to vote for federal representation, as you know. Um,
Right.
do you think the federal government should provide some sort of way for that representation to exist for Puerto Ricans so they can vote on matters like that?
Yes, of course they should. I
Mm,
think that's why I keep referring to the United States seems to be the only major country in the world
mm,
that wants to have a what they call symmetrical relationship. If you're not a
mm,
state, you don't have those rights.
yeah.
And what we should argue is you don't have to be a state to have at least
Mm,
representation in the House of Representatives.
mm,
Some amendments could happen, some interpretations could happen in the U.S. Constitution and allow every citizen who's an American citizen. Right now, we're talking about 3.5 million U.S. citizens who
mm,
don't have any representation, voting representation in Congress,
mm,
and yet all, if not most, federal laws apply to all those citizens. So I should not
mm,
uh, I should not look at it, or we should not look at it just from the standpoint of Puerto Rico. We should look at
mm,
it also from the standpoint of all the other U.S. territories. All the other
mm,
territories are also going through the same kind of problem that Puerto Rico is going through.
yeah. So going on from there, do you believe Puerto Rico's current relationship with the United States benefits or harms the island more overall?
I think you have to do what they call in accounting, cost benefit. There are some things
Mm,
that Puerto Rico benefits from the relationship. Of course, we talked about U.S. citizenship, and
mm,
U.S. citizenship is valued by
yeah.
most Puerto Ricans.
Mm,
Um, Over 50% of the people of Puerto Rico are poor, and
mm,
getting access to federal programs and access to
mm,
healthcare and education funds means a lot in terms of funding for those programs. On the other hand, there's a democratic deficit, which is wrong, and
mm,
it should be addressed by Congress. So yes, Puerto Ricans benefit from the relationship, but also Puerto Ricans are hurt by the fact that ever since 1950 or
mm,
1960, most decisions that affect the island of Puerto Rico and the country as overall, the United States overall, are made in Washington, D.C.
mm,
Washington has become a very centralized uh, place for more public policy decisions. What used to be
mm,
the jurisdiction of states and local
mm,
entities is now the jurisdiction of the federal government. That includes in the environment, that includes healthcare, that includes education, that includes farming, everything
mm,
that is major in the U.S., housing, everything is now run from Washington, D.C. And that kind of centralization has hurt the political power of the states and, of course, the territories.
mm,
So, answer to your question is there are some benefits to the relationship right now. There are some drawbacks, and I think that overall, if those drawbacks are not addressed, uh,
mm,
you know, people have to make a decision if they want to continue living
mm,
like this, and I don't think that's right,
mm,
or if they want to enhance and improve the relationship with the United States,
mm, yeah.
or get away from it, or get away from it.
Mm,
That's the other
mm,
option. Get away from it.
yeah. Yeah. Um, so then how would you say that Puerto Rico's political status that, it hasn't been determined for 128 years under American rule. Puerto Rico's status has always been very murky. How would you say that it's affected the daily life of Puerto Rican citizens?
Well, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. Everything that happens in Puerto Rico, starting with the post
Mm,
office, every time you get a letter, it's the federal
mm,
post office, and Puerto Ricans are um, Puerto Ricans are very much proud of their Puerto Ricanness. I'm very
mm,
proud of being Puerto Rican, and they have tried to balance, every generation has tried to balance that
mm,
relationship with, some people being very angry at the relationship and some people saying
mm,
that, we should change it. Some people less, other people saying, they tolerate their relationship, a little more. Um, in political theory, the relationship needs to be fixed. In political reality, the way the relationship is fixed has to do less with self determination and more with mutual determination, which is what is the United States Congress willing to do to fix the problem? And that's
mm,
where we don't get any answers. We're not
mm,
getting any answers. To
yeah.
this day, we have never had, ever, 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 zero, never, we have never
Mm,
had a bill in Congress about the future of Puerto Rico that
mm,
is a bill that is what we call self-executing, which means
mm,
whatever the result of the referendum is, it
mm,
will be self-executed, and therefore, if Puerto Ricans want independence, it will be independence. If Puerto Ricans want enhancement of the Commonwealth, it will be that. Or if Puerto Ricans want statehood, it will be statehood. Uh,
mm,
it is true that the last, several exercises there seems to be, I don't think if it's a majority, but it's a plurality
mm,
of people who would like in the statehood for Puerto Rico. That
mm,
creates another issue for the nation, for the United States. President Trump has made it very clear that he doesn't want Puerto Rico to be the 51st state. He has gone and said that Canada should be the 51st state. He has said that Venezuela
mm,
should be the 51st state. He has said that Greenland should be the 51st state, but he leaves Puerto Rico out of that list.
mm,
There are a lot of political issues that surround the possibility of a status
mm,
change for Puerto Rico at the current time.
mm. And talking about that, related to that subject, I think it was during Bill Clinton's administration, there was an amendment that they tried to pass for Puerto Rican statehood, but it never really moved. And this is a time when Puerto Rican statehood was the most popular option, I think, or it had the majority. Currently, it's not the majority, even though, like you pointed out, it is the plurality of voters believe that statehood is the best option. But back then, even when the Puerto Ricans in the referendum they wanted statehood, the Americans decided to deny them that. Um,
Well,
so
I think more than denying it is that the U.S. has ignored it.
hmm
No one has ever said no, but no one
hmm
has ever said yes. So they
hmm
have pretty much ignored it. There was a very serious process in 1989.
hmm
The bill was called, the Senate bill in the U.S. Senate was called S-712 under Senator from Louisiana, Bennett Johnston.
hmm
And a lot was accomplished there. A lot was,
hmm
there was a lot that happened there. But it was the last serious effort that took place in the U.S. Senate. In the
hmm
most recent House of Representatives, Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, and the person who's now the current governor of Puerto Rico,
hmm
Jennifer Gonzalez, introduced a bill, and that was able that they got that bill approved in the House. And
hmm
that bill basically calls for a referendum and,
hmm
kind of testing what the people of Puerto Rico want. My problem with all of these referenda is that if I don't really know, if I'm not clear,
hmm
what are my options? How could I
hmm
vote? How could I vote
yeah.
for, what does
hmm
statehood mean? What does, independence mean? There is an issue here, which I think is bigger than what the United States is thinking of right now, and that's cultural and political identity. The politics
mm,
of identity are the most powerful forces in the world right now,
mm,
regardless of the United States. Talk about Palestinians, talk about Israelis, talk about
mm,
Jews, talk about Iran, talk about, even Ukrainians. The politics of identity are the most important
mm,
element to understand um, throughout the world right now. And I think to
mm,
discuss the issue of Puerto Rico using concepts of the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and the term of colonialism and other terms,
mm,
I think takes away the richness of the debate and the
mm,
complexities of the debate right now.
mm. So then my fourth question was, what role do you think colonialism still plays in Puerto Rico? Which you said that we should move away from colonialism as a word to talk about, like, because like you just said now, that removes part of the discussion since it's evolved into something more
Well,
complicated.
well,
But
I mean, there's political colonialism. There's no question
mm,
about it. But the
yeah,
concept of economic colonialism, where
mm,
the metropolis is taking away your resources, that's not true.
mm,
Uh,
yeah,
the cultural colonialism is not happening. I mean, if
mm,
anything, it's the other way around. As I
mm,
mentioned to you
yeah,
earlier, Bad Bunny is the number one icon in the world,
mm,
and people in the United States are dying to see him. And he was the main event at the Super Bowl. So,
mm,
who is colonializing who,
mm,
right?
yeah,
So there are some elements. Again, I'm not trying to um, I'm not trying to water down
mm,
the important elements of democratic colonialism that have to be
mm,
addressed. I'm just saying that it is not as simple as talking about colonialism
mm,
40, 50 years ago, where
mm,
the subjected territories were subjected to the language, were subjected to
mm,
to all the elements
mm,
surrounding the colonial power. In this case,
mm,
there are cultural elements and identity elements that are very strong
mm,
on Puerto Rico, which has never, those elements have never been colonized. There
mm,
are elements that have to do with sociology and psychology of the Puerto Ricans. There are elements that have to do with our arts and our culture. And there are
mm,
elements that have to do with, democracy. And those elements in
mm,
democracy are the ones that have to be addressed.
mm,
Question is, and I think that's the challenge in public policy, which is a very complex challenge, is
mm,
can you actually work with the problem of democratic deficit
mm,
while at the same time addressing the other issues? Because, for
mm,
example, if you say, okay, the easiest thing is to tell Puerto Ricans, okay, you're an independent country, fine, goodbye. Let's just, cut off
mm,
um, our direct relationship. There are 6 million people who are Puerto Ricans living in the United States.
mm,
I want to tell you one thing: they're not going to be happy. They're not going to be
mhm.
happy at all. Those who live in
Yeah.
Florida are not going to be happy. Those who live in New York are not going to be happy. And you have in Florida over 1.1 million Puerto Ricans, and in New York
Mm,
over 1 million Puerto Ricans. They're not going to be happy. So I am not saying that it doesn't have to be addressed. I'm just saying it
mhm,
has to be addressed in such a way that we take into account the relationship that exists and enhance it in such a way that you don't take away rights that all Puerto
mhm,
Ricans have right now.
mm. I understand. Yeah. And then moving from that, how do you think Puerto Rican culture and identity have been shaped by American rule? Um,
Well, it's been over 125 years of American rule in Puerto Rico.
mm,
Again, there has been a guagua area, which is a bus, an
mm,
Airbus that goes back and forth from Puerto Rico to the U.S. and from the U.S. to Puerto Rico. I think Puerto Ricans have kept their language, have kept their culture.
mm,
I don't. Puerto Ricans don't have a deficit of identity at all. Puerto Ricans
mm,
are very proud of being Puerto Rican.
mm,
And anywhere you go, you will see a Puerto Rican flag. I drive around New Jersey where I teach, and I go to Trenton where many Puerto Ricans live, and
mm,
I see Puerto Rican flags all over the place. And that's beautiful. That's just a sense of identity, which I think is absolutely beautiful. However, the issue is how do we keep working on reshaping that relationship so that we can make it better uh,
mm,
to address the democratic deficit that the people of Puerto Rico have within the nation. Of course, if Puerto Rico became a state, there are some issues about identity and about
mm,
that Puerto Ricans will reject. Puerto
mm,
Ricans overall, the main language in Puerto Rico is not English, it's Spanish.
mm,
And Puerto Ricans want to continue speaking Spanish. Puerto Ricans want to have their own identity at the Olympic Games,
mm,
and they want to be represented at international events as Puerto Rico.
mm,
Um, the question then becomes, why is that not possible? Well, that's not possible because in the US, the 50 states all participate under one Olympic flag.
mm,
But look at the World Soccer Championship now that the FIFA thing
mm,
that's right now.
yeah.
You have the UK, you have England playing,
Mm,
you have Scotland, you have
mm,
Wales had a team. So,
mm,
why is it not possible to, instead of trying to have a melting pot, why don't we have countries, and this is the challenge for the United States, that look more like a salad bowl, where you
mm,
have different colors, different shapes,
mm,
and different flavors that
mm,
represent the people from those areas. So
mm,
it's a very complex issue, and it's an issue that needs a lot of attention from the Congress right now.
mm. I see. So then, if you could send one message to Americans and U.S. lawmakers about Puerto Rico's political status, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say it is shameful that 128 years later, or 100, however
Mm,
many, almost 130 years later, when we're celebrating 250th anniversary of the United States, it is
mm,
shameful that no one is paying attention to the rights of 3.5 million US citizens who live in the territories.
mm,
There are
mm,
models, there are ways of doing it, there are many, many, many ideas and that have been floated in the past. I think
mm,
it is time for Congress to look at the United States territories and pay attention, not just to Puerto Rico, but to all of them,
mm,
and make
mm,
sure that we develop a recipe that will actually include the opinions and the
mm,
ideas of those members of the U.S. territories as part of our national
mm,
democracy.
mm. Okay, I think that's a good answer. So with that, thank you for letting me interview you for my project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Good, best of
Uh,
luck to you and to your students, fellow students. All the best. And
mm,
please do come visit Puerto Rico whenever you have a chance.
yeah. Right, thank you.